Well, hello everybody, this is David Bianco. Welcome back to the channel. Well, here it is, we're in 2024 now, and again, as I put in a video previously, it's a good time to reflect on the time of the past and look to the future. And in looking at 2023 and even before, my channel has had a lot of vinyl shootouts. And I often get asked about the equipment that I use and to some degree the process that I use. But I recognize there are some subtleties and differences in the process that I perform in order to come up with my conclusions. And I thought maybe it's time I shared that a bit with my audience. So that's coming up next on our Safe and Sound Texas audio excursion. So if you noticed in my intro there, it ends with goes beyond the ears. That's a weird thing to say about vinyl shootouts. I mean, it's all about listening to the music. And of course it is. But there are some subtleties and nuances to my approach that I'll be getting to that will tell you why I use that title. Now, I want to start out with equipment. Always it's a question about equipment. I try most often to put in a list of my equipment that I use, which I will do again for you here. So as you can see, my equipment is fairly modest in the world of, quote, audiophiles. But what is an audiophile? To me, it's one who really enjoys the audio. That's really what's critical. Now, obviously, one can have systems in the hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And of course, one would expect as you get up higher and higher, you get a better and better sound reproduction. And while that is true on paper, it isn't always true in the listening room. Now, I don't want to get into a controversy around that because great equipment does sound better in 99% of the circumstances when well paired with other equipment. And again, it always is based on what sounds best to us. But I founded this channel on the layman, the working man, the people who love audio but want to be able to afford hearing the best audio. And so that's how I came into this and have remained over time. Sure, I've owned some top-end equipment at various times, like the Nakamichis when cassettes were big, and they were really the high end of the brand, for example. And I've owned some high-end Techniques turntables over time, especially when I was DJing. But things change. And here the system I have, as you can see, is a fairly modest one overall. I mean, I haven't sat and put the numbers together on the cost of what this system is, but I would say it's under $2,000. And that is, to me, fairly reasonable in the market for all of that. And I'd say it's well under $2,000. Now, I've added one piece here at the bottom, that Art USB Phono Plus analog to digital. It's actually a little box that you can use as a phono preamp, or you can let line in just go through it, which is what I do because I use the Gordon sleeve for my phono stage. I purely use that to be able to digitize my outputs out of my turntables, and that's the sole reason that I bought that. Not expensive, $99, does a great job, bought it on Amazon, very effective. Some of my shootouts now, I am including some links to the files that I used when I compared these. Now my comparisons are on the live audio, of course, always. The comparisons can be done by headphones and or on speakers. Typically, I always do both. I always start with listening on speakers, and then when I've got a basic idea, an image of what I think the sound is like or the difference is, I corroborate that through headphones, which again provide a little different listening experience, a little bit more imaging in terms of a cocoon, so to speak, as you have on headphones. Some of the dynamics, the things that you might feel in a headphone with bass, for example, are present as well. So one of the methods to my madness is, in fact, to listen on both speakers and headphones, and really to work in collaboration with those. And when there is something subtle or a nuance maybe that I pick up with the headphones, I'll go back and listen for it on the speakers, because reproduction is different on different transducers. And as I mentioned, a cartridge and speakers are the only transducers. Of course, headphones are a form of speaker, so they are in the same category as a transducer. So, first method of madness, I use both speakers and headphones to do my evaluations. The next element in my approach is that I have two turntables with the same cartridge that I can use to compare and play the songs off of each LP side by side to compare them with a slight delay between each of the running LPs by about 10 seconds so that I can switch back and forth. And how I do that is I go through, as I have an NAD 3140 and the Graham Slee I have bridged to be able to go between the two, and I can switch back and forth between the two sources and get immediate feedback in order to understand the differences in real time between them. I hear how it sounds on number one phono, and then I can hear how it sounds again, the same part of the song on number two phono. Now I have to have an intermediate in there for potting the two and giving them their difference of variation in output, because there are differences between the sources to get these what we call volume matched. And so I have a switch that has a adjustable volume control on it that allows me to balance those two out to be equal to each other. And I can do that through a test tone that I put through a meter, which equalizes to make sure the outputs out of the turntables match. And then auditorily, or with the dB meter, I then can check whether or not the two areas of the song I'm listening to are yielding the same output in decibels. So the second method of my madness is the ability to do these shootouts with the records playing side by side, instead of using one turntable where I have to, quote, remember how what I just played sounds and then play the next source and hopefully remember to compare what they sound like. That's not nearly as precise as being able to go back and forth and A/B the two in real time. One of the things you might recall if you've watched any of my vinyl shootouts is when I talk about the bottom end and the way that sounds, I often also talk about the way it feels, where it hits me in the gut, how it feels personally when I'm in the room. The thing I haven't shared is some of the other aspects of that I use to judge things. One thing that happens when you're listening to music pretty intently is there's a lot of information coming at you actually auditorily. And sometimes it's difficult to break everything apart in terms of what you're listening to and what you're feeling. So oftentimes after I've basically done my comparisons in my room, I go back and play some of the tracks that have maybe the bassier sections of them, and I will listen to it and feel the wall near the room where I have my equipment to determine what in fact is happening from that standpoint. How much engagement of the air does it have that it really causes a vibration of any kind? In my own room, I've literally had things fall off of a stand or something because I've had it close to or on a speaker. And that tells me something. That's a very objective thing that one can see. You know, the old saying, it literally shook the walls, or, it knocked something off the wall. These kind of things that I use are in fact a way for me to get a better feel, no pun intended, yes, pun intended, to feel the music. And when it comes to that bottom end, it is a lot by feeling. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole discussion about subwoofers. I have a separate video on that you can watch, but I don't have one in the system. So I'm really listening for and feeling for the bottom end. And a lot of times, those checks that I do outside the room and how it feels, and again, how it feels in the room physically with different objects sometimes, does tell the story of what's really happening. Because let's face it, it's waveforms that we're really dealing with. And how accurate those waveforms are, or how strong they are, or how intense they are in fact something that can't be denied. They are what they are. So the third method to my madness is to feel the bass, to try to find methods that are objective beyond my ears, as I said originally, beyond my ears, to be able to feel the difference in some of the pressings. And they're there. And again, I go back to the fact that when you listen on headphones, sometimes you get that real feeling in your head. You can feel that certain kind of vibration on one versus the other, and it's very immediate feedback. I also do that with my speakers to get a similar type comparison in the room, because that is objectively what's going on. And again, shootouts are very subjective. Of course they are. This provides a bit of an element of objectiveness to the process, and I think it's worthy of saying that it's my third method of madness. So these are some of the differentiators I think that may exist in my approach compared to others. I'm not saying it's the perfect approach, but I will say I've evolved it over time from my original setup, and I've really been satisfied with the outcomes that I've been able to achieve with it. Hopefully you found the reviews I have done helpful, and these shootouts have brought you a better clarity on, in fact, what a pressing does deliver. Now again, results may vary, systems do vary, rooms do vary. One of the reasons I use headphones is it's not a room. Well, it's a room in and of itself, but it's not subjected to as many external issues that might be present in a room, with the sounds all bouncing off the walls, so to speak, or bouncing off the acoustic treatment that you have, whatever it might be. So these approaches and variables and methodologies are there to try to find a way to come to something that's fairly conclusive. And that is my goal, because the objective here is to make sure that we spend our money wisely, and that we, in fact, are able to understand what a person is saying and then evaluate how that affects us. What does it mean to us? If something is maybe a little bright, maybe we like bright, so maybe that's the one we want. Or another pressing maybe really has a great bottom end and really strong and impactful, and we don't like that. Well, it's important that we know that. So the rating system is my fourth method of madness that I brought to the table. Again, it's subjective, but I've tried to give you an understanding of the relative difference between the categories that I provide you. And one of the ones that I talk about is the quietness of the vinyl. Now, a lot of people talk about it maybe in abstract terms of, it may be dead quiet, which is kind of rare, but I try to be a tough grader on this. And I also try to bring some reality to the fact that some of the compounds that are used today are, in fact, in some cases better than what we got on a standard record. And in fact, some of those standard records may sound excellent, but maybe the vinyl isn't quite as quiet. If that doesn't bug you, throw that number out. It doesn't matter to you. But in a matter of openness. I feel it's important to provide these categories. So my fourth method of madness is to provide you some objective numbers that I think are relatable to the differences in what I find in what I hear. Now that you've heard these, you might wonder, what do you mean a method to your madness? Well, there's an old saying that one might say to another saying, there must be a method to your madness, meaning there must be a reason for you doing the things that you do that might seem a little unconventional to someone else. And in my case, that's it. Well, some people might think it's madness just to do a vinyl shootout or to compare pressing A to B to C to D. I mean, just throw the music on and enjoy it. And I'm all for that too. But again, if we want the best of the best and we want to know what to stay away from and what to maybe lean into to buy, then these are hopefully helpful in that area. But yeah, there's times I think I'm mad when I'm doing this because a lot of these things I'm like, I don't want to hear that album for another year because, boy, I've heard enough of it when I do a lot of different iterations of a certain pressing. But hopefully I'm doing that for your benefit and you've gained from it because that's why I'm here. So as always, thanks for watching. If by chance you're not a subscriber, please consider doing so by pressing on the bell and selecting the all option. And if you give me a thumbs up or a like, that's appreciated. And any comments, I'd love to hear your feedback on this one because I feel like I'm opening the kimono a bit on this in terms of my approach. And if you have any questions, please lay them out there in the comments as well. So I always thank you for joining me and tell you next time we're going to take another great Safe and Sound Texas audio excursion. Take care, everybody.